This story is titled, My Girlfriend's Court-Ordered Prenup Would Have Given Her My Entire Fortune. But instead of signing this money hunter's trap, I filed a counter lawsuit for $40,000 that she'll definitely lose after years of our relationship. Sup Reddit, I'm 29 years old, and I always thought the dramatic relationship stories I read online were written by people who needed therapy instead of anonymous validation from strangers on the internet. Yet here I am, typing this out at 2 a.m. because I can't sleep. It's funny how life works sometimes. You think you're above the chaos until you're drowning in it yourself. I've been carrying this absolute dumpster fire of a situation around for months now, and I figure I might as well let strangers on the internet enjoy the show. Maybe someone else can learn from my mistakes, or at least get some entertainment out of my misery. So I was engaged to this woman I'll call Victoria. She's 28, and we had been engaged for almost a year when everything went to hell. We were together for 4 years total, and our wedding was supposed to happen in just 4 months. Everything was set. Venue booked, caterer paid, photographer locked in, the whole 9 yards. Most of the cash for all those deposits came straight from my account, something like $28,500 worth of non-refundable payments. At the time, it wasn't a big deal to me. I was just excited to marry the woman I thought I loved and who I believed loved me back. For most of our relationship, we were that couple that everyone either loved or secretly hated. We were teammates through and through, and we had this rhythm that just worked perfectly. We'd laugh at the stupidest inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, debate about movies for hours without getting annoyed, and all that good relationship stuff that makes you feel like you've figured out this whole love thing. She'd plan these elaborate date nights with activities I'd never think of, and I'd surprise her with her favorite Thai food after particularly rough days at work. It felt easy and natural, like we had stumbled onto some secret formula for relationship success. We actually met at a friend's birthday party about 5 years ago. I was helping set up the sound system because I'm apparently the designated tech guy in our friend group when she walked in carrying these homemade brownies that looked professionally made. She caught me staring, probably with my mouth hanging open like an idiot, and said with this amazing smile, "Don't worry, I'll save you the biggest piece." I knew right then that I was completely into her. We ended up talking the entire night, completely ignoring everyone else at the party, and I managed to get her number before she left. The rest just flowed naturally from there. Our first year together was like something straight out of a romantic comedy. You know the drill. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. We were blowing up each other's phones every 5 minutes with random thoughts and jokes. All that lovey-dovey crap that makes your friends want to throw things at you. But here's the weird part that should have been my first clue. Something was different about Victoria. That cringy honeymoon phase just never stopped. When year 2 rolled around, we were still disgustingly into each other. Year 3, same deal. We were like that couple in movies that everyone assumes will crash and burn, except we just kept going strong. Eventually, I figured screw it, and she moved all her stuff into my place after our second year together. It seemed like a complete no-brainer at the time. There was no crazy ex-boyfriend drama, no psychotic behavior, no red flags waving in my face. We were just two idiots who enjoyed making breakfast together every morning and arguing about what to watch on Netflix every night. Life was simple, comfortable, and exactly what I thought I wanted. Then about 8 months ago, things started getting weird. It wasn't like obvious red flags waving in your face weird. More like that unsettling feeling you get when you're home alone and think you heard something downstairs, but you can't tell if it's a serial killer or just the air conditioning making noise. It was all little stuff that individually seemed insignificant, but together started forming a pattern that made my stomach twist. Suddenly, Miss I Have Nothing to Hide slapped a password on her phone. This was the same woman who used to hand me her phone to check messages while she was driving, who never cared if I saw her texts or social media. Now her phone was locked tighter than Fort Knox. Then, these mysterious networking events started popping up on her calendar. Events that she couldn't explain if her life depended on it. When I'd ask casual questions like, "Oh, what's this networking thing about?" she'd give these vague, evasive answers that told me absolutely nothing. Around the same time, she developed this suddenly convenient interest in my financial situation. "How's your 401k doing, babe?" she'd ask out of nowhere while we were watching TV. "Can I see those investment accounts?" You know, since we're practically married already. Meanwhile, if I so much as glanced at her credit card statements, which I discovered showed 3 maxed out cards, she'd completely flip her shit. She'd act like I'd asked to read her teenage diary or something equally invasive. I made a joke one day saying something like, "What are you running? Some secret spy ring now?" She laughed it off and said, "No, work's just been emailing me a lot lately." But a couple of days later, she set up that phone password. The timing caught me completely off guard because she'd never used one before in all the years we'd been together. But it didn't stop there. She started stepping out of the room to take calls, which was completely new behavior for her. Her phone would ring and she'd be like, "Oh, let me just grab this real quick," and then disappear into the bedroom or even outside. If I asked who it was afterward, she'd just shrug and say, "Just a friend from work," in this dismissive tone that clearly meant the conversation was over. There was also this new habit of keeping her phone face down on tables and counters. I didn't even realize it was a thing she was doing until one day I reached over to hand her something, and she quickly moved her phone out of the way, like I was about to see state secrets. I seriously thought I was losing my damn mind at this point. Like, am I just being that pathetic, jealous boyfriend who needs therapy? But my gut kept screaming, "Something's off, dumbass!" And it wouldn't shut up no matter how much I tried to ignore that voice in my head. Then there was Patricia, Victoria's mother. Holy shit, this woman was something else entirely. Intense is putting it mildly. Think helicopter parent meets drill sergeant meets Disney villain, and you're getting close to Patricia's energy. At first, I chalked it up to normal protective mother behavior. She'd grill me about my job, my family history, my childhood pets. Probably would have asked about my blood type and sperm count if she could have gotten away with it. Victoria had warned me early on that her parents were extremely selective about who they let into their precious family circle, but they seemed to tolerate me well enough in the beginning. Robert, her dad, was the complete opposite of his wife. He was this quiet guy who had permanently glued himself to whatever game was on TV. The poor bastard had clearly learned years ago that contradicting Hurricane Patricia just wasn't worth the trouble that would follow. The man had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd surrendered his balls to the lost and found box decades ago, and never bothered to check if they'd been claimed. But lately, Patricia had upgraded from merely intense to full-blown Category 5 nightmare territory. "Travis needs to add you to the house deed before the wedding," she'd tell Victoria right in front of me during our forced Sunday dinner torture sessions. "It's just what responsible couples do. We're talking about my house here, the one I'd saved for years to buy, the one I'd put a down payment on with my own money, the one I owned free and clear before Princess Victoria was even in the picture. But sure, Patricia, let me just hand over half of my biggest asset because you think your precious daughter deserves a participation trophy for deigning to marry me." Makes perfect sense. She would corner me at family barbecues with questions like, "How much does a marketing director at your company really make?" Or, "Victoria says you're being modest about your salary." Or my personal favorite, "Have you thought about a job at my friend's company? The benefits are much better there." Meanwhile, Robert would just sit there with his beer, completely checked out from the conversation, which was becoming typical behavior for him. All these things kept nagging at me. Victoria wasn't exactly giving me those typical cheater signs you read about online, but her mother's increasingly aggressive comments combined with Victoria's sudden secretiveness started stacking up in my mind like evidence in a case I didn't want to solve. So after one of these family dinner ambushes, I decided I needed to protect myself, even though it made me feel like a paranoid asshole. I moved some of my savings to a separate account that Victoria didn't know about. I made copies of all my financial statements and stored them somewhere safe. I even changed my investment account passwords, which felt like the most paranoid thing I'd ever done in my life. The whole time I was doing this stuff, I felt like I was betraying the woman I loved, but something deep in my gut just felt off. It wasn't like me to be so suspicious of someone I'd been with for years, but that voice in my head kept telling me I needed to be careful. Then, completely out of nowhere, Victoria starts obsessing over this luxury soap business she supposedly wants to launch. Suddenly, she's an expert on organic ingredients and essential oils, spending hours researching suppliers and competitors. She'd leave Pinterest boards open on her laptop with pictures of million-dollar soap empires and successful female entrepreneurs. "We just need about $45,000 for initial inventory and marketing," she'd say, like it was pocket change, emphasizing the word "we" in a way that made my skin crawl. Since when was this business venture my financial responsibility? Don't get me wrong. I had always been supportive of her career goals and ambitions. When she switched from advertising to event planning 3 years into our relationship, I was her biggest cheerleader. When she wanted to take that expensive social media marketing course last year that cost almost $3,000, I encouraged her to go for it and even helped her research the best programs. But this soap business idea came out of literally nowhere. And the way she talked about it wasn't like, this is my dream, or this is something I'm passionate about. Instead, it was more like, this is our retirement plan, and this is how we're going to get rich. I don't know. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Maybe this was just normal pre-wedding jitters that every couple goes through. Maybe I was being a complete dick for not supporting her entrepreneurial dreams. I'd never been the type of person to jump to conclusions or assume the worst about people, especially someone I'd been solid with for 4 years. Sure, we'd had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that ever made me think, oh shit, there's real trouble here. But that pit in my stomach just wouldn't go away, no matter how much I tried to rationalize everything. Then one night she announced that she had a networking dinner with potential investors. Something about her outfit choice and the extra perfume she put on didn't feel like a business meeting to me. I sat there watching her get ready, this uneasy feeling washing over me like a cold wave. Which investor is this again? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual and supportive. Just someone from my network, she said vaguely, not making eye contact while she applied her lipstick. He's got connections to some boutique retailers. Of course it was a he. Now, I'm not proud of what I did next, but I followed her. I want to be clear. This wasn't because I was trying to catch her cheating or anything like that. I just needed to make sense of what was happening to our relationship, and my gut was screaming that something was wrong. I parked down the block from this upscale steakhouse downtown and positioned myself where I could see through the large front windows. Through the glass, I could see her at a corner table, partially obscured by some decorative partition. I couldn't get a clear view of whoever she was meeting with, just glimpses of what looked like a man's profile. Dark hair, expensive-looking suit. What really struck me was how Victoria's demeanor kept shifting throughout the evening. One minute she'd be sitting up straight, nodding seriously, and gesturing with her hands like she does during work presentations, all professional and focused. Then she'd suddenly transform, leaning in closer to this guy, laughing a bit too enthusiastically at whatever he was saying, and touching her necklace in that specific way she does when she's trying to make an impression on someone. At one point, she reached across the table, and I couldn't see what for. Could have been passing a document or business card. Could have been something else entirely. I want to emphasize that nothing definitively inappropriate happened that I could see. There was no kissing, no obvious hand-holding, nothing that would qualify as smoking gun evidence. Just moments and gestures that didn't quite fit with the important investor meeting story she'd given me. These were small things that most people probably wouldn't notice or think twice about, but after 4 years together, I noticed. I knew her body language, her mannerisms, her tells. I drove home before they finished dinner, my mind racing the entire way. Part of me felt completely ridiculous for being so suspicious. Maybe it really was just business. Maybe I was creating problems that weren't actually there. But that knot in my stomach wouldn't go away, and something about the whole situation just wasn't adding up. I still couldn't put my finger on exactly what was wrong, but I knew something was. The next evening, Victoria showed up at home with this weird energy shift that immediately put me on alert. She had made my favorite dinner, this elaborate pasta dish that usually took her hours to prepare, and she was wearing that black dress I always complimented her on. She kept touching my arm throughout the meal, which was a complete 180-degree turn from her recent distant behavior. The sudden affection felt almost performative, like she was putting on a show. "Babe, I've been thinking," she said, opening her laptop to show me some business slides she'd apparently been working on. "We're going to be amazing business partners. You handle the finances, and I'll be the face of the brand." Here we go again with this soap business bullshit, but I'd had enough of playing along at this point. "Since when are you actually serious about starting a business?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Last month you were all excited about that promotion opportunity at work." She barely missed a beat, which should have been another red flag. "This is so much bigger than that job," she said, her eyes lighting up with what looked like genuine excitement. "With your investment skills and my marketing background, we could retire by 40. She leaned closer to me, and I could smell that expensive perfume she'd worn to her investor meeting. "I was thinking we'd set up a joint business account right after the wedding," she continued. "Maybe $55,000 to start with. That should cover everything we need." $55,000 for soap. "Luxury soap," she corrected when she saw my expression, her smile tightening slightly. "It's an untapped market with incredible profit margins." Something felt incredibly calculated about this entire performance. The timing of the home-cooked dinner, The dress she knew I loved, the sudden physical affection, and now this convenient business idea that required a significant chunk of my money. Why the sudden interest in soap specifically? I asked. And why wait until after the wedding to start this? Her answer came just a little too quickly. Just seems like the right timing. Before immediately changing the subject to some Netflix show she wanted us to watch together. I let the topic drop for the evening, but that night I barely slept. The whole conversation kept playing on repeat in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being manipulated. Everything felt too convenient, too perfectly timed, too rehearsed. A few days later, I was checking my email when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a message from Goldstein, Myers, and Associates Family Law with the subject line, Prenuptial Agreement, Sterling Knight. I froze, staring at my computer screen. This wasn't an email from Victoria. This was from her lawyer. A lawyer I didn't even know existed until this exact moment. I clicked the email open with trembling hands, and as I scrolled through the attached document, my stomach twisted tighter with each paragraph I read. This wasn't just a standard prenuptial agreement designed to protect both parties. This wasn't just about keeping our respective assets separate. This was calculated, strategic, and absolutely predatory in every possible way. According to this document, my premarital assets, my house, my retirement accounts, my savings, would stay mine, which seemed normal enough. Her premarital assets and the $31,000 in credit card debt I later discovered would stay hers, which also seemed reasonable. But then it got absolutely insane. Anything we earned during the marriage would become her separate property if we got divorced. My income, my investments, any raises or bonuses, all of it would legally belong to her. I would waive all rights to spousal support, no matter how long we were married or what circumstances led to a divorce. Any side projects I developed or businesses I started would automatically become her intellectual property. Most shocking of all, I would be required to invest in her business ventures as part of my spousal obligations, and if her soap business needed funding, I would be legally obligated to provide it or be considered in breach of my marital duties. I stared at my computer screen, rereading the document multiple times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My stomach felt like it had dropped through the floor. I'd never been the type of person to jump to conclusions or assume the worst about people, but this was undeniable evidence laid out in black and white legal language. The business idea, the secret dinners, her mother's increasingly aggressive questions about my finances. They had been setting me up as the funding source for her exit strategy. The plan was apparently to get married, drain my accounts to fund her soap business, and then bail with half my assets and her new guy. I called my lawyer immediately, my hands still shaking as I dialed his number. After I forwarded him the prenup, and he had time to review it, there was complete silence on the phone for what felt like a full minute. "This is the most predatory prenuptial agreement I've ever seen in 20 years of practice," he finally said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Do not sign this garbage under any circumstances." He sent a professional absolutely not response that same evening, detailing exactly why this agreement was completely unacceptable and one-sided. That's when Victoria texted me. "My parents want to have dinner tonight to discuss some wedding details." I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to avoid the inevitable confrontation, to just text back saying I wasn't feeling well and deal with this mess later. But another part of me needed to see how deep this rabbit hole actually went. I wasn't about to let them steamroll me into signing away my financial future, so I went to dinner, and Patricia started in on me before I even had food on my plate. "So Travis," she began with that fake smile I was starting to recognize, "Victoria mentioned you received the prenuptial document this morning." I nodded, waiting to see where this conversation was going to go. My gut was in absolute knots, but I kept my face as neutral as possible. "I know these things can seem so formal and intimidating," she continued, her smile looking more and more forced. "But every smart couple does this nowadays. It's like car insurance. You don't expect to crash, but you're glad you have it when something happens." Robert grunted something that might have been agreement from his spot at the table, not making eye contact with anyone. "My sister and her husband did one just like this," Victoria added, reaching for my hand across the table in what I now recognized as a calculated gesture. "It's totally standard practice for couples with assets." Standard. Right. I finally spoke up, pulling my hand away from hers. "Having all marital assets become your separate property is standard?" I asked, my voice calm despite the anger that was building inside me. "Me being required to fund your business ventures as a marital obligation is standard?" Patricia's fake smile tightened considerably. Well, Travis, Victoria will be making sacrifices for your marriage too. Her career might take a backseat when you have children together. This just ensures she's protected financially. Protected. This isn't protection, I said, my voice still steady. This is a financial hostage situation. That's when Patricia's mask finally slipped completely off. Her smile vanished entirely, replaced by a cold stare that made the room temperature feel like it had dropped 10 degrees. Let me be very clear about something, she said, leaning forward with her manicured nails digging into the tablecloth. If you don't sign this prenuptial agreement, there will be no wedding. Period. Mom! Victoria started, looking genuinely uncomfortable for the first time all evening. No, he needs to hear this. Patricia cut her off sharply, her voice as sharp as a knife. We're not letting Victoria enter a marriage without proper protection. And if you decide to walk away, don't expect to see a single cent of what you've already spent on deposits. That's the price of getting cold feet. She looked at me like I was something disgusting she'd found stuck to the bottom of her designer shoes. You think you're special? You think my daughter couldn't find someone else who'd be more cooperative and appreciative? There are plenty of men out there who would appreciate what Victoria brings to the table. I sat there completely stunned by how quickly the facade had dropped. All those Sunday dinners where she'd treated me like family, all those times she'd acted interested in my life and career, it had all been completely fake. 5 years of fake smiles and fake interest, just waiting for the right moment to show her true colors. Victoria finally looked directly at me, but there was something different in her eyes now. Something cold that I'd never seen before. You know, Travis, she said with this artificial sweetness that made my skin crawl, this really isn't that big of a deal. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about it. It's just a piece of paper that protects both of us. Both of us? I asked, genuinely confused. How exactly does it protect me when it gives you everything and leaves me with absolutely nothing? She actually rolled her eyes at me. You're completely exaggerating everything. Besides, if you really loved me, you'd want me to feel secure in our marriage. Unless... Her voice trailed off dramatically. There's something you're planning that makes you afraid of this prenup. The emotional manipulation was so blatant, it was almost laughable. She was trying to flip this entire situation around and make it seem like my reluctance to sign was proof that I had bad intentions. It was classic gaslighting, and I couldn't believe I was seeing it so clearly now. Every man who truly loves his wife would sign something like this, Patricia added, her voice dripping with judgment and condescension. Robert signed something very similar, didn't you, honey? Robert mumbled something that nobody could actually hear, but his dead eyes told me everything I needed to know about what 30-plus years under Patricia's thumb looked like. You're being overly dramatic about this whole thing, Victoria said, finally dropping the sweet act entirely. If you didn't have anything to hide, you wouldn't be so defensive about it. Unless all that talk about building a life together was just talk. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that the woman I thought I knew was completely gone. Or maybe she had never actually existed in the first place. I was completely speechless. You know what? Patricia chimed in, not bothering to hide her disdain anymore. I never thought you were good enough for her anyway. Your job is fine, I guess, but Victoria deserves someone with real ambition. Someone who understands her value and what she brings to a relationship. Victoria didn't even bother defending me. She just nodded along with her mother's brutal assessment, like they'd had this exact conversation many times before behind my back. And that house of yours? Patricia continued, warming up to her theme. It's cute and all, but it's hardly the neighborhood Victoria should be raising children in. We always assumed you'd upgrade once you had access to our family connections. What do you mean, your connections? I asked, finally finding my voice again. Don't act naive, Travis, Victoria snapped at me. You know my family has opened doors for you. That promotion you got last year? Dad put in a word with his golf buddy. Your new client? That was Mom's recommendation. You didn't think all of that happened just because of your skills, did you? This was complete news to me. Total fiction. I had earned every single promotion and every new client through my own hard work and competence. The fact that they had been creating this narrative behind my back, taking credit for my professional achievements, made my blood absolutely boil. So I stood up from the table without touching my food. Where are you going? Victoria demanded, like I was some disobedient child trying to leave the dinner table without permission. None of your business, I replied, which seemed to catch both women completely off guard. Patricia snapped to her feet as well. Either you sign that prenup, or the wedding's off. It's that simple. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. And Travis, if you walk away from this, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why. How you got cold feet, how you couldn't commit when it mattered. Your reputation won't survive it. I actually laughed, genuinely laughed, which seemed to catch both women completely off guard. They clearly weren't expecting that reaction. Threaten my reputation to whom exactly? I asked. Patricia's face flushed bright red with anger. I'm just stating facts. The choice is yours. No, let me state some facts for you, I said, my voice steady and calm. That prenuptial agreement is complete garbage, and your pathetic attempt to intimidate me isn't going to work. She stared at me, apparently speechless for the first time in years. I glanced over at Robert, who had suddenly become fascinated by the pattern on the tablecloth. You're not used to people standing up to you, are you, Patricia? I grabbed my keys from the table. I'll be in touch about my decision. Then I looked directly at her. And Patricia, let me tell you something. People who try to strong-arm others usually end up getting exactly what they deserve. I walked out of that house without looking back, ignoring Victoria calling my name from behind me. The drive home was a complete blur. My head was spinning with everything that had just happened. How had I not seen this coming? 4 years with someone, and you think you really know them. Turns out I didn't know Victoria at all. I spent the next day going through old photos, text messages, and emails, looking for signs I might have missed along the way. Was she always like this, and I just didn't see it? Or did something change over time? I honestly couldn't figure it out, which was almost as disturbing as everything else. 2 days later, I got a text from Victoria. Your lawyer's response shows you don't trust me or believe in our future. Wedding's off? I stared at my phone, watching those 3 dots appear and disappear as she presumably typed and deleted additional messages. I expected to feel heartbroken. 4 years down the drain and all that. But honestly, all I felt was this cold clarity washing over me. They had shown their hand, realized I wouldn't fold like Robert had, and were now taking their chips and leaving the table. This wasn't about love or trust or building a future together. This was about money. Specifically, my money. The $28,500 in non-refundable deposits I'd already paid. The house they wanted me to add her name to. The future income they planned to siphon through that soap business venture. My reply was simple. We need to talk about getting those deposits back. She left me on read, which was exactly what I expected. Of course she did. The prenup scheme had failed, but they were still planning to walk away with my $28,500 in wedding payments. Like hell, that was going to happen without a fight. I called my lawyer that same afternoon. We went through everything. The venue, the photographer, the caterer, the band. $28,700, all non-refundable at this point according to the contracts. And all of it had come from my personal account. I want every penny back, I told him. He sent a demand letter the next day with copies of all the receipts and payment confirmations. Pay up within 15 days, or we'll see you in court. Their response came just 3 days later. Her lawyer offered $7,500 as a gesture of goodwill. My lawyer didn't even dignify that insulting offer with a direct response. He just restated our demand for the full amount and reminded them of the approaching deadline. Then came the family pressure campaign, which was almost comical in its predictability. Patricia called my parents, telling them that I had broken Victoria's heart and was being greedy over a few dollars. Victoria's sister texted me, saying that I clearly never loved Victoria if I was quibbling over money like this. The irony of them accusing me of caring too much about money was almost funny, considering everything they just tried to pull with that prenup. 2 weeks later, the offer increased to $12,000. They're testing your resolve, my lawyer explained. They want to see if you'll cave under pressure, stand firm. I did exactly that. This wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about the principle of the thing. They had tried to screw me over with that predatory prenup, and now they were trying to keep half of my wedding deposits on top of it. Not happening. After another week of legal back and forth, they came back with $18,500. Final offer, her lawyer claimed, trying to sound authoritative. Still not enough, I told my lawyer without hesitation. They need to return every single penny. Are you absolutely sure about this? He asked. Litigation will probably cost more than the difference you're fighting for. I don't care about the cost, I said. They don't get to win this, not even a little bit. Around that same time, Victoria showed up at my house crying. This was about a month after our disastrous dinner confrontation, and seeing her on my doorstep caught me completely off guard. "This is all just a big misunderstanding," she said, her voice cracking with what seemed like genuine emotion. "Mom just wanted to protect me, but we can write a new prenup together. Something fair for both of us." That's when I suddenly remembered the restaurant incident. "Who's the guy from the restaurant, Victoria?" I asked quietly. Her face went completely white, like all the blood had drained out of it. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. "The investor you had dinner with last week. The networking meeting." "That was just a business contact," she said, but her voice was shaky now. "I can't believe you followed me. That's completely psychotic behavior." I didn't say anything else. I just watched her face, and the transformation was absolutely terrifying to witness. One second, she was the vulnerable, tearful ex-fiancé I had fallen in love with years ago. The next second, she was this hostile stranger with eyes narrowed and voice dripping with contempt. She started pacing around my living room like she still owned the place. "You know what's really funny?" she said, her tone completely different now. "My mom was right about you all along. She said you'd never be able to provide the lifestyle I deserve. Said you were too small-time to ever amount to anything significant." That comment stung, not because I thought it was true, but because it revealed how she and her mother had been discussing me behind my back all this time. They had been sitting around dissecting my worth based purely on my earning potential, like I was some kind of investment opportunity rather than a human being. "And now you're actually suing me over wedding deposits," she laughed. But there was absolutely no humor in the sound. "Do you have any idea who my family knows in this town? One phone call from my dad and your precious career is over." She genuinely believed she was entitled to keep the money I had paid for our wedding, entitled to my future earnings through that prenup, entitled to a lifestyle funded entirely by my hard work. And now she was actively threatening my livelihood. "You should leave," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice now completely cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you're throwing away by doing this." "I think I have a pretty good idea, actually." "No, you don't," she hissed like an angry snake. "Because when I'm done with you, you'll be lucky if you can get a job flipping burgers in this town. My family doesn't take well to being disrespected, especially by someone who should be thanking us for even considering letting him into our world." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but then turned back for one final attempt. "Last chance, Travis. Drop this stupid lawsuit, sign the prenup, and maybe I'll convince my mom to give you another shot at this." The sheer audacity of that statement left me completely speechless. She was still acting like she was doing me some kind of favor by agreeing to marry me. "Goodbye, Victoria." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. All I could think about afterward was that the woman I had loved for 4 years had never actually existed. She was just a mask Victoria wore until she didn't need it anymore. The next few weeks were an absolute roller coaster of emotions and legal maneuvering. When they missed our final deadline at the $18,500 offer, my lawyer filed a formal lawsuit in county court. The court date was set. Depositions were scheduled, and he even mentioned that we'd be requesting her phone records as evidence of her duplicity. They had thought they could push me around, drain my accounts, and then walk away with no consequences whatsoever. I wasn't going to let that happen. 3 days after getting officially served with the lawsuit papers, her lawyer suddenly wanted to discuss settlement options. It was funny how quickly their tone changed when they realized I wasn't backing down and that this was going to become a matter of public record. The full $28,700 plus our $950 in legal expenses appeared in my account the very next day. No further negotiation required, no more legal games. I couldn't believe it was actually over. After months of this absolute bullshit, it ended with a simple bank transfer. I sat on my couch that night with a beer, feeling this strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had won, technically, but it still felt like I'd lost something important. My trust in my own judgment, my certainty about people's motivations, maybe even a bit of my natural optimism about relationships. But that's not even the best part of this whole mess. About a week after the settlement, I got a phone call from a mutual friend who had always been closer to Victoria than to me. She felt guilty about staying silent for so long and wanted me to know what was really going on behind the scenes. The mysterious business contact turned out to be her boss's son, and he hilariously dumped her ass the moment he realized she wasn't getting any of my money after all. Apparently, they had been seeing each other for months, and he was the one who first suggested she should secure her future before making any major moves. He had basically been coaching her through this entire scheme. My friend explained that he told Victoria to get as much as she could from me financially, and then they'd start their new life together with a nice financial cushion to fall back on. This wasn't just cheating. This was a calculated financial scheme with me as the primary target. My friend forwarded me some screenshots of text message conversations between her and Victoria from months earlier. Reading them made my blood absolutely boil with rage. "Travis is such a pushover, lol," Victoria had written in one of the messages. "He actually believes I want to start a soap business." "As if," her friend had replied with a bunch of laughing emojis. Then her friend asked, "But what if he doesn't sign the prenup?" "Oh, he will," Victoria had responded confidently. "Mom's got it handled. He's so desperate to be part of a real family that he'll sign anything if we pressure him enough. And if not, whatever. I've already got my eye on an upgrade anyway." An upgrade. That's what I was to her. A stepping stone, something to be used and discarded when a better option came along. But the real cherry on top of this entire shit sundae was what happened when Robert, her father, finally saw the prenup during the legal proceedings. He apparently lost his absolute shit. According to our mutual friends, he'd had no idea what Patricia and Victoria were planning. All those times, he sat silently at the dinner table, looking completely checked out. He wasn't just being passive or disinterested. He was completely in the dark about their scheme. "You know what Robert told me?" another friend said when we met for coffee. "He said seeing that prenup was like looking in a mirror. He realized Patricia had been doing the same kind of manipulative shit to him for decades. It turns out Robert had signed something very similar before their wedding, believing it was just a legal formality that all couples went through. Over the years, it had effectively transferred all of his assets to Patricia, leaving him financially dependent on her despite being the primary breadwinner for their entire marriage. He'd been trapped, unable to leave because he would have had absolutely nothing to his name if he tried to divorce her. The man was pale as a ghost when he saw what they tried to do to you," my friend continued. "He kept saying, 'They're doing it again. They're doing to him what she did to me. But you weren't a puppet like Robert. They messed with the wrong person.' After 35 years of marriage, Robert filed for divorce last month. The last straw wasn't just Patricia's plotting with Victoria against me. It was learning during the divorce proceedings that they had been systematically siphoning money from his retirement accounts into a separate fund that only Patricia could access. A fund he didn't even know existed until his lawyer discovered it. You should have seen Patricia's face when her lawyer told her the divorce was actually happening," my friend said, with a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "She kept screaming that Robert couldn't leave her, that he had no right after everything she'd supposedly done for him. When Robert didn't back down like he had for decades, she actually threatened to destroy his relationship with their adult children if he went through with the divorce. The woman's sense of entitlement knew absolutely no bounds. In her twisted mind, Robert existed solely to fund her lifestyle. The idea that he might assert his independence was completely incomprehensible to her. Word of the whole mess spread through their social circle like wildfire. Patricia tried desperately to turn their friends against Robert, spinning elaborate stories about him having a midlife crisis and claiming he was mentally unstable. But the prenup fiasco with me had already raised eyebrows among people who knew both families, and most people weren't buying her victim act anymore. It was like watching dominoes fall in real time. First, our wedding imploded, then Victoria's relationship with her boss's son crashed and burned, then her parents' marriage exploded. All because they tried to screw me over with that predatory prenup. I could have felt bad about the collateral damage, I guess. But honestly, it felt like karma finally doing its thing. I hadn't wished for any of this chaos to happen to their family. I had just refused to be their victim, and the rest took care of itself. The friend situation split exactly how you'd expect it to. About half of our mutual friends swallowed Victoria's carefully crafted story about me being controlling and hiding assets, sending me judgmental texts without bothering to hear my side of the story. The other half quietly reached out with variations of, "I always knew something was off with her," or "I never trusted her mother." It's funny how one prenup dispute can sort your real friends from the fake ones better than any personality test ever could. "I always got a weird vibe from her mom," one friend told me over lunch a few weeks later. "Remember that time at your birthday party when she kept asking super detailed questions about your recent promotion? I thought it was just her being nosy, but now it all makes perfect sense. I'm not going to lie. The whole experience really fucked me up for a while. I had this weird mix of feeling like a complete idiot for not seeing the signs sooner, but also feeling relieved that I had caught it before the wedding actually happened. For the first month or so after everything ended, I kept replaying conversations in my head, looking for clues I might have missed. It's hard not to question your own judgment after something like this. Did I ignore obvious red flags? Was I being naive about people's motivations? These thoughts kept me awake at night, going over and over the same questions. But all of those doubts and second-guessing completely vanished when I ran into Robert at a coffee shop on a random Wednesday afternoon. He looked completely different. Lighter somehow, like he'd finally shed a weight he'd been carrying for decades. He spotted me from across the coffee shop and came over to my table without hesitation. "I owe you a huge apology," he said as he settled into the chair across from me. "I should have said something that night at dinner. I knew what they were doing wasn't right." I shrugged. "You were in a tough spot." "For 35 years," he said with a sad smile. But there was something peaceful about his expression now. But not anymore. He told me he'd moved into a small apartment downtown, bought himself a motorcycle, and was dating a kindergarten teacher he'd met at a community center art class. "Patricia absolutely hates her," he said with a genuine chuckle. "Says she's too simple, whatever that's supposed to mean. But she actually lets me talk, asks what I think about things. It's..." He paused, searching for the right word. "It's peaceful." He leaned forward with this look like he was about to share state secrets. When Patricia got served with the divorce papers, she showed up at my apartment at midnight, banging on the door and screaming that I owed her for wasting her life with me. She even called the cops, claiming that my car was stolen. My car that I paid for with my own money. When the police showed up, she tried telling them that Robert was mentally unstable and needed to be committed for his own safety. Then she started rattling off everything she'd supposedly given me over the years, like our entire marriage was some kind of business transaction where I defaulted on payments. "And the worst part," he continued, genuine sadness crossing his face despite everything, "Victoria was right there backing her up, telling the cops I'd always been unstable. My own daughter, man." He shook his head slowly. "Anyway," he said, clearly wanting to change the subject from that depressing topic. "Enough of that bullshit. How are you holding up through all this?" We chatted for a while about nothing particularly important. Work, the weather, plans for the weekend. It was actually really nice to see him coming back to life after decades of being emotionally buried. As we were getting ready to part ways, he gripped my arm firmly and looked me straight in the eyes. "Listen, Travis, I need you to know something important. You didn't just dodge a bullet with those two, you dodged a nuclear missile. What they tried to do to you," he shook his head with obvious disgust, "it would have destroyed you piece by piece until you didn't recognize yourself anymore. I know this because that's exactly what happened to me over 35 years. He maintained eye contact, making sure I was really hearing him. "Don't ever doubt that you made the right call, no matter what anyone else says or thinks. Some people are just fundamentally toxic, and you can't save them or change them. You can only save yourself." Those words were such a relief to hear from someone who had lived through decades of what I'd almost signed up for. As for Victoria, she's still posting these fake deep Instagram quotes about knowing your worth and not settling for less than you deserve. The irony is absolutely incredible, but I doubt she sees it. Meanwhile, Patricia is still running her mouth to anyone who will listen, calling me a financial abuser of all things. The projection is so obvious it's almost funny, like being called fat by a sumo wrestler. I heard through the grapevine that Victoria tried to start another business after the soap thing fell through. Some kind of wellness coaching venture that's basically just repackaged Instagram advice and motivational quotes. It's apparently not going well at all. Her boss's son moved on quickly and is now dating some yoga instructor, according to our mutual friends. According to those same friends, Victoria's been desperately trying to paint herself as the victim in all of this, claiming that I led her on for years, only to abandon her when real commitment became necessary. She's been telling people that I was secretly planning to leave her all along, which is why I was so resistant to the prenup. The last I heard, she'd actually had the nerve to take her sob story to our local Facebook community group, asking for support during her healing journey after being financially abused by her ex-fiancé. The comment section quickly filled up with people who knew both of us personally, calling her out with receipts and screenshots of her own social media posts. The post mysteriously disappeared within a few hours. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever thought possible. That prenup turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me because it showed me exactly who Victoria really was before I made the biggest mistake of my life. And by the way, I took some of that $28,700 I got back and went to Costa Rica for an entire month. Volcano hiking, beach days, food that'll melt your face off in the best possible way. It was the best decision I'd made in years and gave me the perspective I desperately needed. I've started dating again, but much more carefully this time. No family introductions until I really know someone now, and I'm paying much closer attention to red flags. Sometimes, those warning signs are hidden under layers of charm and manipulation until they're waving right in your face. When that happens, the most important thing you can do is trust your instincts and not ignore them, no matter how much you want to believe everything is fine.